I do support Proposition B. You know, we have a market economy, and I don't think the market is going to address the issue on its own. I actually think it's unfair for us to expect developers on their own to address the issue of affordable housing. I do think that the city has to play a role. It has to step in and put up some money to actually fund affordable housing projects. I think that's just the reality. That's the only way that affordable housing is going to happen. But I think it's really critical along the lines that Tom was noting, that it's not enough to talk about affordable housing. It's really critical to talk about affordable housing for families. We need to make sure that we have the 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom units being built in San Francisco. And I think that along the lines of working within the market, it does make sense, where appropriate, to provide density bonuses so that you do have an incentive for developers to create housing for families. Something else that I would say is that as strongly as I believe that we need to create low-income housing, I think that's very critical, it's also important not to forget the middle class. A lot of people who feel that they don't make enough money to buy the million-dollar homes, but also they make enough that they may not qualify for existing programs. And what's happening to them? I think that's where the city also has to play a role. And I think that the District 9 supervisor is going to have to play a leading role in making sure that that issue is addressed across the board. In terms of the issue of the in-lot units and parking, I do think that Eric is correct that it's a citywide problem, but I do think that in addressing that citywide problem, we do need to make sure that there's room left in there to make sure that there's flexibility in terms of different neighborhoods having different solutions. The one thing that I would say about driving is that I do think that the city needs to create incentives for people to drive less. And for me, a big focus has to be public transportation. San Francisco should have the best public transportation system in the world. We don't. Muni is unreliable. I talked to so many people who have to leave an extra hour early to make sure they get to their job on time. It takes money and other changes within how Muni operates to make sure that we have the best Muni possible.
Thank you.
Money is being spent. And I actually think that Muni illustrates the need for that. Let me give you an example. Eric and folks talked about some of the changes that have been proposed. The problem that I have with the way they went about it is that some of the changes that have been proposed, had they taken the time to actually talk to the people, speak to the people who live in these neighborhoods, I don't think that some of those changes would have been proposed. If you look at the 67 line, which actually serves Bernal Heights and the Alamany Housing Project, had Muni taken the time to actually listen to the people who live in Alamany, they would have found out that that's the only line that many people have to actually get to a Safeway. What they're proposing is essentially cutting the route in half, so that if you live in Alamany Housing, now you're going to have to take 2 buses to get to Safeway. I think that's wrong, and I think that that's something that makes no sense. That's where being a squeaky wheel, I think, sort of comes in. A supervisor needs to make it clear to city agencies, make sure that before you start proposing changes that affect my neighborhood, that you actually take the time to speak to me, the supervisor, and to speak to my constituents so that what you're proposing actually makes sense. Look at the 24 line. That connects Bernal Heights, and that's the line that a lot of people take to get to Kaiser Hospital. Why is it that they're thinking of changing it? And had they taken the time to speak to people in Bernal Heights, they would have seen that that change doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, best practices. I don't think that the private sector provides all the solutions, but I do think that the city has something to learn in terms of making sure that we incorporate best practices in city operations.
Okay, I just signed the letter. So this is committing for the funding, the revenue to go to McLaren Park to make sure that, let's read it, to replace the missing play structures and gardeners and improve the amenities that have deteriorated, the trails, picnic tables, barbecue pits, as well as provide protection to the users of the park by returning police protection in some form to McLaren Park like it once had. I agree to all that. I think that some people also complain about the water tower. I don't think we can take it down, but maybe we can beautify it somehow. Mural. Kind of mural on it. I think that landscaping is huge. There needs to be more than 3 gardeners taking care of the entire McLaren Park. Some people think that there needs to be 10. I'd work to shoot toward 10. If we can't do that, and it is the second biggest park, it is a diamond in the rough, we are letting down a huge segment of this city, and that's something that we can't continue to do. As far as the actual police protection, there were, of course, police back in the day. I don't know if that's actually possible, but we could at least look at bicycle patrolling. And in terms of lighting, I think we could look at, without having to run lines into the park, I think we can look at solar-powered lighting for the park, make it safer. And I also think that repavement of the pathways. If you can't push your stroller, if you don't feel safe, if you're an elderly person walking down the park pathways, then what's the use of having a park like that?
The families out of San Francisco is something that I've been working on for many, many years now. It's quite concerning when the vast majority of the people you grew up with in the city have had to leave. Your family members have had to leave. It's really a struggle to stay in San Francisco, and the biggest issue is around our housing and, of course, the connection with our salaries as well, the increase of. But I think the biggest issue we need to think about in terms of housing are a couple of things. One is land, the opportunity to build on land. There are very few opportunities to do that, and when those opportunities open up, like we're opening up in the eastern neighborhoods, which is the northeast part of the Mission, the South of Market, all the way to the piers, is that we need to get the most out of that development. We have to make sure that when those developments open up, we increase the amount of community benefits we get and really get up to the highest levels of affordability and family housing that we can get. In the Eastern Neighborhood plans, if the plan that I'm supporting right now, I'm the only candidate that's actively involved in this, we get our part of the plan, and we can actually build up to 2,500 more affordable housing units that are currently in the plan. We have to work diligently to preserve the existing housing that we have currently, because that is our most valuable housing stock we have. We cannot lose our existing housing site. I'm supporting some legislation that just got introduced at the Board of Supervisors for small site acquisition to actually use our public funds to take some of our smaller sites that are getting threatened in terms of Ellis Act evictions and turning into high-level condos and keeping those as affordable housing units. That's the quickest and cleanest way. In terms of legalizing in-law units, actually that's a citywide issue. It's not a localized issue. This is something every neighborhood is going through if you follow housing closely. And in fact, the biggest issue I support is legalizing in-law units only if they're close to transportation corridors, because then the impact on terms of parking is a little bit less. But it's a controversial issue throughout the city. It's something we have to have a lot of sensitivity with because we need the housing, but also there's a lot of issues in terms of quality of life with neighbors and whatnot.